She's one of the most famous women who ever lived. An icon of power, beauty, and tragedy. Her name alone conjures images of golden barges on the Nile, epic romances with the most powerful men in the world, and a kingdom of unimaginable wealth. Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt. Her story has been told and retold for over 2,000 years, shaped by poets, playwrights, and Hollywood producers. We see her face in our mind's eye, the kohl-lined eyes, the regal bearing, the undisputed Queen of Egypt. And in that title lies the myth, the fundamental misunderstanding that has colored our entire perception of her. This is the Cleopatra we think we know, the legendary Queen of Egypt. But the truth is, the story you've been told is built on a foundation of political spin and a family secret that changes absolutely everything. She wasn't ethnically Egyptian. So, who was she really? And how did the daughter of a foreign dynasty become the ultimate symbol of a country she wasn't from by blood? To find the answer, we have to unravel a history of power, politics, and a calculated identity that has been debated for centuries. First, let's establish the common belief, the story that's been so deeply embedded in our collective consciousness that to even question it feels like sacrilege. When we hear Cleopatra, we immediately think Egypt. It seems simple enough. She was the Queen of Egypt. She ruled from the magnificent city of Alexandria, and she embraced the ancient religious traditions of the land, even presenting herself as the living incarnation of the goddess Isis. Her entire political and personal life was intertwined with the fate of the Egyptian kingdom. Popular culture has certainly done its part to cement this image. Think of the monumental 1963 film Cleopatra. Elizabeth Taylor's portrayal, dripping with glamour and commanding the screen, became the definitive image for generations. The film, while capturing the drama of her life, presented her as the quintessential Egyptian queen, her identity inseparable from the sands and temples of her kingdom. From Shakespeare's Serpent of Old Nile to countless documentaries and books, she is almost always framed first and foremost by her Egyptian title. This association is so strong that it feels intuitive. It's like saying Queen Elizabeth II was British or that Louis XIV was French. It's a geographical and political reality. She ruled Egypt, therefore she was Egyptian. But in history, especially in the turbulent world of the 1st century BC, things were never that simple. To get to the reality of who Cleopatra was, we have to look past her title and her palace on the Mediterranean, and journey back in time, not to the founding of the pyramids, but to the sudden death of a different world-conquering ruler. So, if she wasn't ethnically Egyptian, what was she? This isn't just a matter of splitting hairs over ancient ancestry. Understanding her true origins is the key to unlocking her entire life story, her political genius, her motivations, and the very reasons she has been so misrepresented for millennia. This is where history becomes a detective story. The clues aren't buried in forgotten tombs. They're laid out in historical records, on ancient coins, and in the very structure of her family tree. To begin our investigation, we can't start in Egypt. We have to start hundreds of miles to the north, across the Mediterranean Sea, in the rugged mountains of Macedonia, in northern Greece. And we have to start with a name that echoes through history even louder than Cleopatra's. Alexander the Great. It's in the spectacular collapse of his empire that we find the seed of Cleopatra's own. In 332 BCE, the young and brilliant Macedonian king, Alexander the Great, conquered Egypt, liberating it from Persian rule. The Egyptians, weary of their Persian overlords, welcomed him. He was crowned pharaoh and honored their gods, establishing a new capital city on the coast that would bear his name for eternity, Alexandria. But Alexander's focus was always eastward, on conquest. He left Egypt to continue his campaign, which would stretch all the way to India. Then, in 323 BCE, Alexander died suddenly in Babylon at the age of just 32, without having named a clear successor. His vast empire, built on relentless ambition and military genius, immediately began to fracture. His most powerful generals, known as the Diadochi, or the successors, fell upon the territories he had conquered, carving up the known world amongst themselves in a brutal, decades-long power struggle. One of these generals was a shrewd and capable Macedonian nobleman named Ptolemy, son of Lagus. He was one of Alexander's most trusted commanders and closest companions. While others vied for control of the heart of the empire, Ptolemy made a calculated and brilliant move. He secured for himself the richest, most defensible, and most stable prize of all, Egypt. He even managed to hijack Alexander's funeral cortege, bringing the great king's body to be entombed in Memphis, and later Alexandria, a move that gave his own rule immense legitimacy. In 305 BCE, Ptolemy dropped the title of governor and declared himself King Ptolemy the first Soter, meaning the savior, the first pharaoh of a new dynasty. This was the Ptolemaic dynasty, and for the next 275 years, his family, a line of Macedonian Greeks, would rule Egypt. Cleopatra, born more than 2 centuries later, was the last of his line. So, to be precise, Cleopatra's family wasn't just Greek. They were Macedonian, a distinct northern Greek people who, under Alexander, had come to dominate the Hellenistic world. For nearly 3 centuries, the Ptolemies reigned over Egypt, but they didn't become Egyptian. They ruled as Greeks. They established Alexandria as the intellectual and cultural capital of the Hellenistic world, a beacon of Greek civilization meant to rival and even surpass Athens. They built the legendary Library of Alexandria and the Pharaoh's Lighthouse, wonders of the Greek world. They spoke Greek, administered their kingdom in Greek, and minted coins with their portraits in the Greek style, depicting themselves as Hellenistic monarchs, not traditional Egyptian pharaohs. Crucially, they maintained a strict cultural and social separation from the native Egyptian population. For generations, the Ptolemaic court was an island of Greek culture. They lived in Alexandria, which was in Egypt, but not necessarily of it. Ancient geographers even referred to the city as Alexandria ad Egyptum, Alexandria by Egypt, implying its distinct character. While they were politically savvy enough to respect and patronize the powerful Egyptian priesthood and adopt pharaonic titles to legitimize their rule in their private lives, language, and blood, they remained staunchly, proudly, and purposefully Greek. They treated Egypt as a source of immense wealth and power, a resource to be managed and exploited to fund their ambitions in the wider Mediterranean world. This created a clear 2-tiered society, a small Greek-speaking ruling class and the vast Egyptian-speaking populace they governed. This wasn't a story of assimilation. It was a story of occupation, albeit a long and complex one. And to ensure that power and heritage remained firmly within the family, the Ptolemies adopted a practice that seems shocking to us today, but was key to preserving their foreign identity for so long. To keep their bloodline pure and consolidate power, the Ptolemies engaged in systematic inbreeding. Brother-sister marriage became a standard practice within the dynasty, a custom they may have adopted to emulate the traditions of earlier Egyptian pharaohs, but which also served the very practical purpose of preventing their Greek Macedonian blood from mixing with outside influences, especially native Egyptians. This created a family tree that is less a branching tree and more a tangled, looping wreath. If you trace Cleopatra's lineage, you find a dizzying array of uncles marrying nieces and brothers marrying sisters. It's a genealogical knot of staggering complexity. For example, it's widely believed that Cleopatra's own parents, Ptolemy XII Auletes and Cleopatra V Tryphina, were brother and sister, or, at the very least, first cousins. This means that generation after generation, the same Macedonian genetic heritage was concentrated and passed down. As a result, after nearly 300 years in Egypt, it's believed there was barely a drop of native Egyptian blood in the primary royal line. While this practice of incest seems abhorrent to modern sensibilities, For the Ptolemies, it was a political tool. It ensured that the royal line remained exclusively Greek, and that the immense wealth of the dynasty was never diluted or contested through outside marriages. It kept the circle of power incredibly small and incredibly tight. This is the central, unshakable fact of Cleopatra's heritage. Genetically and culturally, the family she was born into was an exclusive, self-contained Macedonian Greek dynasty that had been transplanted onto Egyptian soil. But if this is true, if her entire family was so militantly Greek for so long, what made Cleopatra different? Why is she the one we remember not just as a Ptolemaic queen, but as the Queen of Egypt? The answer lies in her own extraordinary character and political brilliance. Cleopatra VII was a radical departure from her ancestors. While her predecessors had largely kept themselves aloof from the culture of the people they ruled, Cleopatra understood something they did not. To truly hold power in Egypt, you had to be more than just its conqueror. You had to be its queen in heart and soul. Her first, and most revolutionary, act was to learn the Egyptian language. The historian Plutarch, writing about a century after her death, noted that she was the first known and possibly the only member of the Ptolemaic dynasty in 300 years to bother learning the native tongue of her subjects. This was a move of pure political genius. Her ancestors had needed interpreters to speak to the vast majority of their own people. Cleopatra could speak to them directly. She was also a gifted linguist in general, reportedly fluent in as many as 9 languages, including Greek, her native language, Egyptian, Ethiopian, Latin, Arabic, and Parthian. This wasn't just an academic pursuit. It was a weapon in her diplomatic arsenal. Being able to converse with foreign dignitaries in their own languages gave her an immense advantage. But learning Egyptian was a domestic strategy. It allowed her to connect with the powerful Egyptian priesthood and the common people in a way none of her family ever could. It signaled respect. It showed that she saw herself not just as a Greek monarch ruling over Egypt, but as the Pharaoh of Egypt. She masterfully blended her Greek heritage with Egyptian tradition. She participated in Egyptian religious festivals and presented herself as the reincarnation of the goddess Isis, a powerful and beloved figure in the Egyptian pantheon. This was a brilliant piece of public relations. To the Greeks, she was a sophisticated Hellenistic queen. To the Egyptians, she was a divine pharaoh, a living goddess. She understood that identity could be a performance, a tool to forge alliances and secure loyalty. She was born a Ptolemy, but she chose to become Egyptian. This dual identity was the source of her power and the key to her survival in a world where her kingdom was being squeezed by the rising might of Rome. It's incredible to think how one decision, learning a language, could so dramatically change the course of history and define a legacy. Cleopatra's choice to break with 300 years of family tradition demonstrates her unique political foresight. What other historical figures do you think made a single, pivotal choice that completely defined their time in power? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this deep dive into the real story behind the legends, take a moment to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next investigation into history's biggest myths. Now, we have to address the one area of genuine historical debate, the one crack in the marble facade of her Greek ancestry where speculation has been allowed to flourish. While we are certain about her paternal line descending directly from Ptolemy I, the identity of Cleopatra's mother is not definitively recorded. Her father was Ptolemy XII, nicknamed Olates, or the flute player. He was himself the son of a previous Ptolemy and a concubine, which already adds a layer of complication. The leading scholarly consensus is that Cleopatra's mother was Cleopatra V. Tryphina, who was very likely Olates' full sister, or a cousin, in keeping with the family's tradition of intermarriage. If this is true, then Cleopatra was of almost entirely pure Macedonian Greek descent. However, because ancient sources are not 100% clear, there is room for other theories. Some historians have proposed that her mother might not have been Cleopatra VI, but rather an unknown woman, perhaps a concubine from the Egyptian elite or from another part of the Hellenistic world. This is the primary argument used to suggest she might have had some native Egyptian ancestry. The fact that Cleopatra was famously the only Ptolemy to speak Egyptian is sometimes used as circumstantial evidence to support this idea. Perhaps she learned it from an Egyptian mother. In 2009, a BBC documentary claimed that remains found in Turkey, believed to be those of Cleopatra's sister Arsinoe, showed features that suggested a mother of African descent. This reignited the debate, but the identification of the remains as Arsinoe is heavily disputed by most scholars, and the methods used to determine ancestry from the skeleton have been criticized. So what's the verdict? The overwhelming weight of historical evidence and scholarly opinion points to a Macedonian Greek mother, consistent with centuries of Ptolemaic dynastic practice. The possibility of an Egyptian mother or grandmother remains a speculative, though intriguing, footnote. But it's this very ambiguity that has been seized upon in later centuries to project all sorts of modern ideas about race and identity onto her. The historical Cleopatra was almost certainly a European woman ruling an African kingdom, but the story doesn't end with her death. In fact, that's when the creation of the myth of Cleopatra truly began. Cleopatra's life ended in 30 BCE. She died by her own hand, choosing suicide rather than the humiliation of being paraded through the streets of Rome as a captive. Her nemesis, the man who had defeated her and her Roman partner, Mark Antony, was Octavian, the adopted son of Julius Caesar. Octavian would soon become Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, and he had a problem. He had just won a brutal civil war against another Roman, Mark Antony, but fighting a civil war was bad for public relations. It made a leader look like a tyrant, not a savior. So Octavian, a master of propaganda, reframed the entire conflict. This wasn't a Roman civil war. It was a foreign war. It was the noble, traditional, masculine West against the decadent, corrupt, feminine East. And the face of that threat was not Antony, but Cleopatra. Octavian's propaganda machine went into overdrive. Cleopatra was painted as a foreign temptress, a sorceress who had used her seductive wiles to ensnare noble Roman men like Caesar and Antony, turning them against their homeland. She was portrayed as ambitious, power-hungry, and dangerously un-Roman. They spread rumors that she wanted to conquer Rome and make Alexandria the new capital of the world. By casting her as the villain, Octavian transformed himself into the defender of the Republic, a man who saved Rome from a foreign queen. This image was incredibly effective and incredibly enduring. Roman poets and historians, writing under Augustus's patronage, cemented this version of the story. They focused on her sexuality, her extravagance, and her foreignness, largely ignoring her intellect, her political skill, and her role as a capable administrator and multilingual diplomat. They created a caricature that served their political purpose, and it's this caricature, the seductive, dangerous, exotic queen, that has echoed down through the centuries, providing the perfect template for stage plays, and eventually, the silver screen. When Hollywood began looking for epic stories, the Roman propaganda version of Cleopatra was a perfect fit. It had everything: glamour, sex, power, betrayal, and tragedy. Theda Bara's silent film version in 1917 played up the exotic vamp image. Claudette Colbert in 1934 presented a cunning seductress. But it was the 1963 blockbuster with Elizabeth Taylor that truly seared this image into the public imagination. The film was a monumental spectacle, the most expensive movie ever made at the time. Elizabeth Taylor's performance was iconic, but it reinforced the myth. Her Cleopatra was defined by her romances with Caesar and Antony, her beauty, and her opulent lifestyle. While the film's plot was broadly accurate to the sequence of events, its focus and aesthetic were a product of their time. The costumes, for example, were a mix of ancient inspiration and 1960s high fashion. The portrayal emphasized the seductress over the strategist, the lover over the leader. The intellectual powerhouse, who was a published author, a skilled naval commander, and a brilliant economist, was lost. The political genius, who held the Roman wolves at bay for over 2 decades, securing prosperity and independence for her kingdom, was sidelined in favor of a romantic heroine. Hollywood didn't invent the myth of Cleopatra, but it perfected it, amplified it, and broadcast it to every corner of the globe, making the Roman propaganda version the accepted reality. In recent decades, the conversation around Cleopatra's identity has taken a new and contentious turn, moving into the complex arena of modern racial politics. The question, was Cleopatra black? Has become a recurring and heated topic, fueled by documentaries, online debates, and casting controversies for new films. This debate often arises from very different places. For some, it is a reaction against the historical whitewashing of African history, a desire to claim a powerful, iconic African queen as a figure of black history and pride. Given that so many historical figures from the region have been portrayed as white, there is a strong impulse to reclaim Cleopatra for Africa. This perspective argues that since she was a ruler of an African nation, and since her maternal ancestry is technically unconfirmed, it is possible she had black African heritage. However, mainstream scholarship, based on the vast body of textual and archaeological evidence, maintains that Cleopatra was of predominantly Macedonian Greek descent, with some potential Persian ancestry from earlier dynastic marriages. From this perspective, calling her black is anachronistic. It imposes modern American and European racial categories onto an ancient world that thought about identity very differently, more in terms of nationality, language, and local culture than skin color. Similarly, calling her white is equally anachronistic. The controversy often ignites fierce reactions, particularly in modern Egypt, where Cleopatra is considered a national figure. Many Egyptians have pushed back against what they see as an erasure of their own history and an appropriation of their heritage, arguing that while she was of Greek origin, she is a queen of Egyptian history. What this modern debate reveals is that Cleopatra has become a cultural touchstone, a figure so potent that different groups want to claim her as their own. The fight over her identity often says more about our own contemporary anxieties and political investments in race and history than it does about the woman herself. So, after peeling back the layers of myth, propaganda, and modern debate, who was Cleopatra? Was she Egyptian? The historical reality is this: Cleopatra VII was not, by blood, an ethnic Egyptian. She was the final product of a 300-year-old Macedonian Greek dynasty. Her native language was Greek, her cultural framework was Hellenistic, and her family tree was a testament to a deliberate, long-standing policy of remaining ethnically separate from the people they ruled. But that's only half the story. The reality is also that Cleopatra was the only one of her line who chose to bridge that gap. She embraced the language, the religion, and the identity of Egypt with a political shrewdness that her ancestors lacked. She didn't just rule Egypt. She performed the role of its pharaoh with absolute commitment. She forged a dual identity, a Hellenistic queen to the outside world and a divine Egyptian ruler to her own people. She was a woman of European ancestry who became the quintessential African queen. Her identity wasn't a simple matter of blood or birthplace. It was a complex, self-fashioned creation, a strategic masterpiece of political branding. She was a Greek who chose to be Egyptian, a diplomat who spoke the language of power in many tongues, and a leader who commanded armies and navies. In the end, perhaps the question, was Cleopatra Egyptian, is the wrong one to ask. Her life and legacy challenge our simple, modern boxes of nationality and race. She forces us to ask more complex questions. What does it mean to belong to a nation? Can you choose an identity that isn't yours by birth? Cleopatra was a cultural and political chameleon. She was a product of Greek heritage, a master of Egyptian presentation, and a formidable opponent of Roman ambition. The fact that, over 2 millennia after her death, we are still so passionately debating who she was is the ultimate testament to her power. Her true, enduring legacy is not written in her DNA, but in her brilliant, unyielding, and utterly fascinating grasp of power, politics, and the art of crafting an identity so powerful it would outlast empires. What do you think is Cleopatra's most important legacy? Her political skill, her cultural bridging, or the powerful myth she has become? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. If you found this journey into the past insightful, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you can join us for our next exploration of history versus reality. Thanks for watching.